Hello, assalamu alaikum. How are you guys? I'm going to go ahead and continue with chapter 4, 5, and 6 of Matilda so that I can post a few more chapters for you to read. You can either read along with me on your own as you wish, but I do recommend that you have a look at the chapters because reading practice is really helpful, especially in 3rd grade. So without further ado, let's get on with it. Chapter 4, The Ghost. There was comparative calm in the Wormwood household for about a week after the superglue episode. The experience had clearly chastened Mr. Wormwood, and he seemed temporarily to have lost his taste for boasting and bullying. Then suddenly he struck again. Perhaps he had had a bad day at the garage and had not sold enough crummy second-hand cars. There are many things that make a man irritable when he arrives home from work in the evening, and a sensible wife will usually notice the storm signals and will leave him alone until he simmers down. When Mr. Wormwood arrived back from the garage that evening, his face was as dark as a thundercloud, and somebody was clearly for the high jump pretty soon. His wife recognized the signs immediately and made herself scarce. He then strode into the living room. Matilda happened to be curled up in an armchair in the corner, totally absorbed in a book. Mr. Wormwood switched on the television. The screen lit up. The program blared. Mr. Wormwood glared at Matilda. She hadn't moved. She had somehow trained herself by now to block her ears to the ghastly sound of the dreaded box. She kept right on reading, and for some reason this infuriated the father. Perhaps his anger was intensified because he saw her getting pleasure from something that was beyond his reach. "Don't you ever stop reading," he snapped at her. "Oh, hello, Daddy," she said pleasantly. "Did you have a good day?" "What is this trash?" he said, snatching the book from her hands. "It isn't trash, Daddy. It's lovely. It's called The Red Pony. It's by John Steinbeck, an American writer. Why don't you try it? You'll love it." "Filth," Mr. Wormwood said. "If it's by an American, it's certain to be filth. That's all they write about." "No, Daddy, it's beautiful. Honestly, it is. It's about—" "I don't want to know what it's about," Mr. Wormwood barked. "I'm fed up with your reading anyway. Go and find yourself something useful to do." With frightening suddenness, he now began ripping pages out of the book in handfuls and throwing them into the waste paper basket. Matilda froze in horror. The father kept going. There seemed little doubt that the man felt some kind of jealousy. "How dare she," he seemed to be saying with each rip of a page. "How dare she enjoy reading books when he couldn't? How dare she?" "That's a library book," Matilda cried. "It doesn't belong to me. I'll have to return it to Mrs. Phelps." "Then you'll have to buy another one, won't you?" the father said, still tearing at pages. "You'll have to save your pocket money until there's enough in the kitty to buy a new one for your precious Mrs. Phelps, won't you?" With that, he dropped the now empty covers of the book into the basket and marched out of the room, leaving the telly blaring. Most children in Matilda's place would have burst into floods of tears. She didn't do this. She sat there very still and white and thoughtful. She seemed to know that neither crying nor sulking ever got anyone anywhere. The only sensible thing to do when you're attacked is, as Napoleon once said, to counterattack. Matilda's wonderfully subtle mind was already at work devising yet another suitable punishment for the poisonous parent. The plan that was now beginning to hatch in her mind depended, however, upon whether or not Fred's parrot was really as good a talker as Fred made out. Fred was a friend of Matilda's. He was a small boy of 6 who lived just around the corner from her, and for days he had been going on about this great talking parrot his father had given him. So the following afternoon, as soon as Mrs. Wormwood had departed in her car for another session of bingo, Matilda set out for Fred's house to investigate. She knocked on his door and asked if he would be kind enough to show her the famous bird. Fred was delighted and led her up to his bedroom, where a truly magnificent blue and yellow parrot sat in a tall cage. "There it is," Fred said. "Its name is Chopper." "Make it talk," Matilda said. "You can't make it talk," Fred said. "You have to be patient. It'll talk when it feels like it." They hung around waiting. Suddenly the parent said, "Hello, hello, hello." It was exactly like a human voice. Matilda said, "That's amazing. What else can it say?" "Rattle my bones," the parrot said, giving a wonderful imitation of a spooky voice. "Rattle my bones." "He's always saying that," Fred told her. "What else can he say?" Matilda asked. "That's about it," Fred said, "but it is pretty marvelous, don't you think?" It's fabulous, Matilda said. Will you lend him to me for just one night? No, Fred said. Certainly not. I'll give you all my next week's pocket money, Matilda said. That was different. Fred thought about it for a few seconds. All right, then, he said, if you promise to return him tomorrow. Matilda staggered back to her own empty house, carrying the tall cage in both hands. There was a large fireplace in the dining room, and she now set about wedging the cage up the chimney and out of sight. This wasn't easy, but she managed it in the end. Hello, 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 the bird called down to her. Hello, hello. Shut up, you nut, Matilda said, and she went to wash the soot off her hands. That evening, while the mother, the father, and the brother and Matilda were having supper as usual in the living room in front of the television, a voice came loud and clear from the dining room across the hall. Hello, 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 it said. Harry, cried the mother, turning white. There's someone in the house. I heard a voice. So did I, the brother said. Matilda jumped up and switched off the telly. Shh, she said. Listen. They all stopped eating and sat there very tense, listening. Hello, 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 came the voice again. There it is, cried the brother. It's burglars, hissed the mother. They're in the dining room. I think they are, the father said, sitting tight. Then go and catch them, Harry, hissed the mother. Go out and collar them red-handed. The father didn't move. He seemed in no hurry to dash off and be a hero. His face had turned gray. Get on with it, hissed the mother. They're probably after the silver. The husband wiped his lips nervously with the napkin. Why don't we all go and look together, he said. Come on, then, the brother said. Come on, Mum. They're definitely in the dining room, Matilda whispered. I'm sure they are. The mother grabbed a poker from the fireplace. The father took a golf club that was standing in the corner. The brother seized a table lamp, ripping the plug out of its socket. Matilda took the knife she had been eating with, and all four of them crept towards the dining room. The father kept keeping well behind the others. Hello, 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 came the voice again. Come on, Matilda cried, and she burst into the room, brandishing her knife. Stick 'em up, she yelled. We've caught you. The others followed her, waving their weapons. Then they stopped. They stared around the room. There was no one there. There's no one here, the father said, greatly relieved. I heard him, Harry, the mother shrieked, still quaking. I distinctly heard his voice. So did you. I'm certain I heard him, Matilda cried. He's in here somewhere. She began searching behind the sofa and behind the curtains. Then came the voice once again, soft and spooky this time. Rattle my bones, it said. Rattle my bones. They all jumped, including Matilda, who was a pretty good actress. They stared around the room. There was still no one there. It's a ghost, Matilda said. Heaven help us, cried the mother, clutching her husband around the neck. I know it's a ghost, Matilda said. I've heard it here before. This room is haunted. I thought you knew that. Save us, the mother screamed, almost throttling her husband. I'm getting out of here, the father said, grayer than ever. They all fled, slamming the door behind them. The next afternoon, Matilda managed to get the rather sooty and grumpy parrot down from the chimney and out of the house without being seen. She carried it through the back door and ran with it all the way to Fred's house. Did it behave itself? Fred asked her. We had a lovely time, Matilda said. My parents adored it. Chapter 5. Arithmetic. Matilda longed for her parents to be good and loving and understanding and honorable and intelligent. The fact that they were none of these things was something she had to put up with. It was not easy to do so, but the new game she had invented of punishing one or both of them each time they were beastly to her made her life more or less bearable. Being very small and very young, the only power Matilda had over anyone in her family was brain power. For sheer cleverness, she could run rings around them all, but the fact remained that any 5-year-old girl in any family was always obliged to do as she was told, however asinine the orders might be. Thus, she was always forced to eat her evening meals out of TV dinner trays in front of the dreaded box. She always had to stay alone on weekday afternoons, and whenever she was told to shut up, she had to shut up. Her safety valve, the thing that had prevented her from going round the bend, was the fun of devising and dishing out these splendid punishments. And the lovely thing was, they seemed to work. At any rate, for short periods. The father in particular became less cocky and unbearable for several days after receiving a dose of Matilda's magic medicine. The parrot and the chimney affair quite definitely cooled both parents down a lot, and for over a week they were comparatively civil to their small daughter. But alas, this couldn't last. The next flare-up came one evening in the sitting room. Mr. Wormwood had just returned from work. Matilda and her brother were sitting quietly on the sofa, waiting for their mother to bring in the TV dinners on a tray. The television had not yet been switched on. In came Mr. Wormwood in a loud check suit and a yellow tie. The appalling broad orange and green check of the jacket and trousers almost blinded the onlooker. He looked like a low-grade bookmaker dressed up for his daughter's wedding, and he was clearly very pleased with himself this evening. He sat down in an armchair and rubbed his hands together and addressed his son in a loud voice. "Well, my boy," he said, "your father's had a most successful day. He is a lot richer tonight than he was this morning. He has sold no less than 5 cars, each one at a tidy profit. Sawdust in the gearboxes, the electric drill on the speedometer cables, a splash of paint here and there, and a few other clever little tricks, and the idiots were falling all over themselves to buy." He fished a bit of paper from his pocket and studied it. "Listen, boy," he said, addressing the son and ignoring Matilda. "Seeing as you'll be going into the business with me one day, you've got to know how to add up the profits you make at the end of each go, and get yourself a pad and pencil, and let's see how clever you are." The son obediently left the room and returned with the writing materials. "Write down these figures," the father said, reading from his bit of paper. "Car number 1 was bought by me for £278 and sold for £1,425. Got that?" The 10-year-old boy wrote the 2 separate amounts down slowly and carefully. "Car number 2, the father went on, cost me £118 and sold it for £760. Got it?" "Yes, Dad," the son said, "I've got that." "Car number 3 cost £111 and sold for £999.50. "Say that again," the son said. "How much did it sell for?" £999.50, the father said. "And that, by the way, is another of my nifty little tricks to diddle the customer. Never ask for a big round figure. Always go just below it. Never say £1,000. Always say $999.50. It sounds much less, but isn't. Clever, isn't it?" "Very," the son said. "You're brilliant, Dad." "Car number 4 cost £86. A real wreck that was, and sold for £698.99.50. "Not too fast," the son said, writing the numbers down. "Right, I've got it. Car number 5 cost £637 and sold for $1,649.50. You've got all those figures written down, son?" "Yes, Daddy," the boy said, crouching over the pad and carefully writing. "Very well," the father said. "Now work out the profit I have made on each of the 5 cars and add up the total. Then you'll be able to tell me how much money your rather brilliant father made altogether today." "That's a lot of sums," the boy said. "Of course it's a lot of sums," the father answered. "But when you're in big business like I am, you've got to be hot stuff at arithmetic. I've practically got a computer inside my head. It took me less than 10 minutes to work the whole thing out." "You mean you did it in your head, Dad?" the son asked, goggling. "Well, not exactly," the father said. "Nobody could do that, but it didn't take me long. When you're finished, tell me what you think my profit was for the day. I've got the final total written down here, and I'll tell you if you're right." Matilda sat quietly. "Dad, you made exactly £4,303.50 altogether." "Don't butt in," the father said. "Your brother and I are busy with high finance." "But, Dad—" "Shut up," the father said. "Stop guessing and trying to be clever." "Look at your answer, Dad," Matilda said gently. "If you've done it right, it ought to be £4,303.50. Is that what you've got, Dad?" The father glared down at the paper in his hand. He seemed to stiffen. He became very quiet. There was silence. Then he said, "Say that again." £4,303.50, Matilda said. There was another silence. The father's face was beginning to go dark red. "I'm sure it's right," Matilda said. You little cheat!" the father suddenly shouted, pointing at her with his finger. "You looked at my bit of paper. You read off of it from what I've got written here." "Daddy, I'm on the other side of the room," Matilda said. "How could I possibly see it?" "Don't give me that rubbish," the father shouted. "Of course you looked. You must have looked. No one in the world could give the right answer just like that, especially a little girl. You're a little cheat, madam. That's what you are, a cheat and a liar." At that point, the mother came in carrying a large tray in which there were 4 suppers. This time it was fish and chips, which Mrs. Wormwood had picked up in the fish and chip shop on her way home from bingo. It seemed that bingo afternoons left her mother so exhausted, both physically and emotionally, that she never had enough energy left to cook an evening meal. So if it wasn't TV dinners, it had to be fish and chips. "What are you looking so red in the face about, Harry?" she said as she put the tray down on the coffee table. "Your daughter's a cheat and a liar," the father said, taking his plate of fish and placing it on his knees. "Turn the telly on and let's not have any more talk." Chapter 6. The Platinum-blond Man. There was no doubt in Matilda's mind that this latest display of foulness by her father deserved severe punishment. And as she sat eating her awful fried fish and fried chips and ignoring the television, her brain went to work on various possibilities. By the time she went up to her bed, her mind was made up. The next morning, she got up early and went into the bathroom and locked the door. As we already know, Mrs. Wormwood's hair was dyed a brilliant platinum blonde, very much the same glistening silvery color as a female tightrope walker's tights in a circus. The big dyeing job was done twice a year at the hairdresser's. But every month or so in between, Mrs. Wormwood used to freshen it up by giving it a rinse in the wash basin with something called Platinum-blond Hair Dye Extra Strong. This also served to dye the nasty brown hairs that kept growing from the roots underneath. The bottle of Platinum-blond Hair Dye Extra Strong was kept in the cupboard in the bathroom. And underneath the title on the label was written the words, "Caution, this is peroxide, keep away from children." Matilda had read it many times with fascination. Matilda's father had a fine crop of black hair, which he parted in the middle, of which he was exceedingly proud. "Good, strong hair," he was fond of saying, "means there's a good, strong brain underneath." "Like Shakespeare," Matilda had once said to him. "Like who?" "Shakespeare, Daddy." "Was he brainy?" "Very, Daddy." "He had masses of hair, did he?" "He was bald, Daddy." To which the father had snapped, "If you can't talk sense, shut up." Excuse me. Anyway, Mr. Wormwood kept his hair looking bright and strong, or so he thought, by rubbing in it every morning large quantities of a lotion called Oil of Violets Hair Tonic. A bottle of this smelly purple mixture always stood on the shelf above the sink in the bathroom alongside all the toothbrushes, and a very vigorous scalp massage with oil of violets took place daily after shaving was completed. This hair and scalp massage was always accompanied by loud masculine grunts and heavy breathing and gasps. "Ah, that's better. That's the stuff. Rub it right into the roots," which could be clearly heard by Matilda in her bedroom across the corridor. Now, in the early morning privacy of the bathroom, Matilda unscrewed the cap of her father's oil of violets and tipped 3/4 of the contents down the drain. Then he filled the bottle up with her mother's Platinum-blond Hair Dye Extra Strong. She carefully left enough of her father's original hair tonic in the bottle so that when she gave it a good shake, the whole thing still looked reasonably purple. She then replaced the bottle on the shelf above the sink, taking care to put her mother's bottle back in the cupboard. So far, so good. At breakfast time, Matilda sat quietly at the dining room table eating her cornflakes. Her brother sat opposite her with his back to the door, devouring hunks of bread smothered with a mixture of peanut butter and strawberry jam. The mother was just out of sight around the corner in the kitchen, making Mr. Wormwood's breakfast, which always had to be 2 fried eggs on fried bread with 3 sausages and 3 strips of bacon and some fried tomatoes. At this point, Mr. Wormwood came noisily into the room. He was incapable of entering any room quietly, especially at breakfast time. He always had to make his appearance felt immediately by creating a lot of noise and chatter. One could almost hear him saying, "It's me, here I come, the great man himself, the master of the house, the wage earner, the one who makes it all possible for the rest of you to live so well. Notice me and pay your respects." On this occasion, he strode in and slapped his son on the back and shouted, "Well, my boy, your father feels he's in for another great money-making day today at the garage. I've got a few little beauties I'm going to flog to the idiots this morning. Where's my breakfast?" "It's coming, treasure," Mrs. Wormwood called from the kitchen. Matilda kept her face bent low over the cornflakes. She didn't dare look up. In the first place, she wasn't at all sure what she was going to see. And secondly, if she did see what she thought she was going to see, she wouldn't trust herself to keep a straight face. The son was looking directly ahead out of the window, stuffing himself with bread and peanut butter and strawberry jam. The father was just moving round to sit at the head of the table when the mother came sweeping out from the kitchen, carrying a huge plate piled high with eggs and sausages and bacon and tomatoes. She looked up. She caught sight of her husband. She stopped dead. Then she let out a scream that seemed to lift her right up into the air, and she dropped the plate with a crash and a splash onto the floor. Everyone jumped, including Mr. Wormwood. "What the heck's the matter with you, woman?" he shouted. "Look at the mess you've made on the carpet." "Your hair!" the mother was shrieking, pointing a quivering finger at her husband. "Look at your hair! What have you done to your hair?" "What's wrong with my hair, for heaven's sake?" he said. "Oh my God, Dad! What have you done to your hair?" the son shouted. A splendid noisy scene was building up nicely in the breakfast room. Matilda said nothing. She simply sat there admiring the wonderful effect of her own handiwork. Mr. Wormwood's fine crop of black hair was now a dirty silver, the color this time of a tightrope walker's tights that had not been washed for the entire circus season. You've dyed it, shrieked the mother. Why did you do it, you fool? It looks absolutely frightful. It looks horrendous. You look like a freak. What the blazes are you talking about? The father yelled, putting both hands to his hair. I most certainly have not dyed it. What do you mean I've dyed it? What happened to it? Or is this some sort of a stupid joke? His face was turning pale green, the color of sour apples. You must have dyed it, the son said. It's the same color as Mom's, only much dirtier looking. Of course he's dyed it, the mother cried. It can't change color all by itself. What on earth were you trying to do? Make yourself look handsome or something? You look like someone's grandfather gone wrong. Get me the mirror, the father yelled. Don't just stand there shrieking at me. Get me a mirror. The mother's handbag lay on a chair at the other end of the table. She opened the bag and got out a powder compact that had a small round mirror on the inside of the lid. She opened the compact and handed it to her husband. He grabbed it and held it before his face, and in doing so spilled most of the powder all over the front of his fancy tweed jacket. Be careful, shrieked the mother. Now look what you've done. That's my best Elizabeth Arden face powder. Oh my goodness, yelled the father, staring into the little mirror. What's happening to me? What's happened to me? I look terrible. I look just like you gone wrong. I can't go down to the garage and sell cars like this. How did it happen? He stared round the room, first at the mother, then at the son, then at Matilda. How could it have happened, Daddy? How could it have happened, he yelled. I imagine, Daddy, Matilda said quietly, that you weren't looking very hard and you simply took Mummy's bottle of hair stuff off the shelf instead of your own. Of course that's what happened, the mother cried. Well, really, Harry, how stupid can you get? Why didn't you read the label before you started splashing the stuff all over you? Mine's terribly strong. I'm only meant to use 1 tablespoon of it in a whole basin of water, and you've gone and put it all over your head. Neat. It'll probably take all your hair off in the end. Is your scalp beginning to burn, dear? You mean I'm going to lose all my hair? The husband yelled. I think you will, the mother said. Peroxide is a very powerful chemical. It's what they put down the lavatory to disinfect the pan. Only they give it another name. What are you saying? The husband cried. I'm not a lavatory pan. I don't want to be disinfected. Even diluted like I use it, the mother told him, it makes a good deal of my hair fall out. So goodness knows what's going to happen to you. I'm surprised it didn't take the whole of the top of your head off. What shall I do? Wailed the father. Tell me quick what to do before it starts falling out. Matilda said, give it a good wash, Dad, if I were you, with soap and water, but you'll have to hurry. Will that change the color back? The father asked anxiously. Of course it won't, you twit, the mother said. Then what do? I can't go around looking like this forever. You'll have to have it dyed black, the mother said, but wash it first or there won't be any left to dye. Right, the father shouted, springing into action. Get me an appointment with your hairdresser this instant for a hair dyeing job. Tell them it's an emergency. They've got to boot someone else off their list. I'm going upstairs to wash it now. When the man dashed out of the room and Mrs. Wormwood, sighing deeply, went to the telephone to call the beauty parlor. He does do some pretty silly things now and again, doesn't he, Mummy? Matilda said. The mother, dialing the number on the phone, said, I'm afraid men are not always quite as clever as they think they are. You will learn that when you get a bit older, my girl. That's the end of chapter 6, which I will post for you to read as well. So Matilda has been getting her revenge on her parents for their treatment of her. While I don't advocate means to support or promote revenge, you can kind of understand why this little 5-year-old feels so strongly against her parents. They don't treat her very nicely, and she's brilliant, and they think she's stupid. So they haven't even figured out it's her yet. I'm pretty sure my mom would have known if I put some stuff in her hair products. What about yours? You think your mom would figure it out? Your dad would figure it out if you were pranking them? Anyway, inshallah, we will continue on in a few days. I hope you read it yourself. Let me know if you have any questions. Make sure to use your dictionary, and I will catch you guys later. Assalamu alaikum. Be well.